If you're joining us, we're doing kind of a surprise live here. We're coming at you the day after the Clippers blow a 22-point lead in what ended up being a 40-point turnaround in favor of the Minnesota Timberwolves. We've had a little bit of time to sort of process, I guess, as much as we can, what really happened, what really went wrong with this Clippers team. But we're also just curious where everybody's at. It's the next day. We want to know how you're feeling about this Clippers team. So go ahead and comment. But Adam, let's just start off. I mean, where do you think things went wrong?
Well, when you're up by 22, and I was kind of getting the temperature of the room last night on Clippers Talk, you came on with me and did a fantastic job after a difficult game like that. But there's blame to go around, right? This isn't one person. This isn't one guy. This isn't one issue. It's not just the coaching staff. It's not just the players. But the one thing I would start with is PG and James Harden needing to be better than taking just 6 shots in the second half. I believe, and this is a fact, I don't even have to believe it, Paul George had more turnovers than shot attempts in the second half of that ball game, where they knew they did not have Kawhi Leonard being able to return. And people are coming in now and flooding in as we're doing the live and impromptu surprise. And I'm happy about that. Even Chuck is wondering what's going on. Oh, by the way, in this live, because we're going to try to spin things in a positive manner at some point here, I hope. And this is positive. Best comment in the comment section here. You win this new logo Clippers sticker. We'll send it to you. I don't know how we normally get their address. I don't know if it's through YouTube or what, or on Twitter, but best comment, I'll send you the sticker of the Clippers new logo here, just to try to entice more people to come in. But, and going back to Paul George and James Harden, I just don't understand with the stakes being that high in that ball game, being up by 22, and then completely falling apart towards the end of the first half. And look, I'm understanding to it being deflating, the fact that Kawhi Leonard and there was so much uncertainty surrounding what was going on with him for about a half hour period of time.
I don't buy that. Like, I'm so sorry. I don't buy that affects the on-court performance. It affects him not being there, affects the team. But I don't buy for a second that it's like, oh, everybody was so worried. We just, how can we possibly maintain a 22-point lead with so much worry about Kawhi and his back spasms? That's ridiculous. That's bunk. I just don't buy it.
I'm not saying it's a good enough excuse. It may have played a small role, but when you're up by 22, there's really no excuse then. Yes, it can be distracting. You're seeing Russell Westbrook go back to the locker room. Multiple people go back there, and there's just this dark cloud over the ball game that's the biggest of the season to try to get back into the hunt for a top 3 seed. And people are wondering what's going on with Kawhi, who has had his injury issues, obviously, over the years with the Clippers. And everybody's kind of on edge. And I do think some of that could affect the game and affect the players. But you also have to have your leaders step up, rally the troops, and rescue a team from falling apart for the third time in the span of a week and a half. How many lessons do you need to know this can't happen again? You got to put your foot down and say, no, not tonight. We're not going to let Minnesota gain confidence and gain momentum and get right back into the ball game where it's an 8-point game at the half. And you've just relinquished what looked like, and I know in today's league it's easier to come back because of the 3-point shooting.
Of course.
But 22 points at home in a game of that level of significance, that just is inexcusable. It can't happen. It's your 4th game against them. You just beat them in their house. You're very familiar with this team, and you knew it was on the line. And or at least have an idea, as much as that uncertainty with Kawhi could affect guys, you probably have an idea he's not coming back tonight at some point. So therefore,
I'm sure they knew before us that he left. Like, I'm sure they knew before us that he had left the building. after,
Or at least if he's gone for that long, at some point you go, yeah, he's probably not coming back. He's probably not going to be
totally,
available for this game, right?
totally. Well,
I
and I
just
just
don't
want to,
understand.
yeah, and I just want to clarify one thing too. Like, it's not giving up a 22-point lead. Like in a vacuum, that's pretty understandable, right? With how quick scoring can go. Obviously, the way that it happens, some of those runs, some of the long stretches without any Clippers scoring is a little troubling. But it's not just that, right? Like the Minnesota Timberwolves are a good team. If they had gotten back into that ball game and it was a back and forth sort of battle, that I can understand. But like for it to be the turnaround that it was, and for you to see, like, it just feels like getting hit by a slow moving train. Like you just see it coming the whole time. And
It's the Austin Powers steamroller scene.
exactly, it's exactly that. And I'm glad that you brought up the tension because I don't know how Kawhi's injury affected things, contrary to what I did say earlier. I mean, I guess when you see a guy sort of go down, maybe you do think about your own mortality, but there is a problem with this Clippers team and tension or pressure. They are not really able to rise up to the moment. They really clench up, and we see sort of the same bad habits, the same poor execution that we've seen time and time again. And I mean, you just really got to wonder, like, at what point are they going to get past this?
Okay, I think that's a great point, and there's more to dig in there. And you just brought up the comment I wanted to see on the big screen here from Jeremy Mormon. He said, "We used to be the comeback Clips." See if you can follow this train of thought that may be going off the tracks a little bit. But I was thinking late last night about something you said early on in the season. I texted you this too. But during, I think, the 6-game losing streak, you said something to the effect of, something is rotten at the core with this team. Something is wrong. There's some deep-seated flaw that is keeping them from getting to that ultimate level they should be at, given the talent, given the level of talent that they have. And granted, they responded and they went on a 26-5 run in 31 games and looked like the best team in the league. And we're going through a moment for this Clippers franchise, which was the best performances that we had seen in the regular season ever. Really, they looked that dominant and that consistent, you could say, for a long stretch of time, offensively especially. The defense, it was still a little bit up and down at times, but it was good enough when you're that potent offensively. But here's what I'll say, and here's kind of my theory on what you talked about in that quote from earlier in the season and what you just brought up here of why the Clippers seem to, especially right now, when they get punched in the face, just fold and collapse and melt down. That's what we've seen over the last week and a half because they were the comeback Clips for so long. So here's what makes it difficult to get a beat on this team and an understanding of their identity. You can certainly say part of their identity in the 2-1-3 era is being resilient because of all the comebacks, more than any other team in the league. 13 comebacks since 2019 of being down 20 points or more. And them rising to the occasion when a player is down, a player of significance like Kawhi Leonard being down, and them still overcoming that and getting to the Western Conference Finals. But I'm wondering now, I hope it's not true, but I'm just trying to figure out why this continues to happen right now with these letdowns and taking their foot off the gas. Is that resiliency a double-edged sword? Has it become that for this team where they've had so many comebacks that it's almost built up this false confidence that they can step on the gas when they need to, that they can flip a switch out there at times because they have done it time and time again before? But it's brought in these bad habits of choosing when to play hard, choosing when to have a level of professionalism that it needs to be at effort-wise, because Paul George called him out for that last night. We have to give better effort consistently from not just game to game where it seems to lack, but quarter to quarter, possession to possession. Has maybe their greatest strength, that resiliency, has led to this weakness that has developed over time? of them being so inconsistent because of the false confidence of, oh, we can come back. We'll figure it out eventually. We'll get them next quarter. And it's become a real issue with them having these letdowns like we're seeing right now. Like Denver gets the benefit of the doubt when they're hanging around the 5 seed because they've won the chip. They've been there and done that.
Well, and the way
They
they've
have
looked
that
out of the All-Star
ability.
break is the opposite. It's the polar opposite of how the Clippers have looked coming out of the All-Star break.
But none of us are surprised by that because they were kind of lying in wait. They had Jamal Murray out for a month at one point. They were treading water, it looked like, of the elite teams in the Western Conference. And now they see an opening for the 1 seed and say, okay, it's time. And they just choose to attack this part of the season because they can get the 1 seed. The Clippers, they haven't won the championship yet. They haven't earned that. They haven't had that built up equity to be able to say that, okay, we're going to take over now. We're going to do our thing. But they play like that at times. There's almost like an entitlement because of all the talent they have, the embarrassment of riches. Like, no, you haven't won the championship yet. You don't get the benefit of the doubt like a team like the Denver Nuggets to just flip a switch when you feel like it.
Yeah, and it
That's my
feels
worry.
I mean, and here's the thing is like these games are like kind of a microcosm of what's been happening in the season, right? Like we went on that Grammy road trip. We had the 9-game winning streak. Like it felt like we were, up 22 in a quarter on the season, and now we're watching it kind of slowly slip away. This has been a 500 ball club essentially since the Grammy trip, and I don't understand. Like each new slap in the face, I'm kind of like, this has got to be the thing that does it, right? Like this is the wake up call, and they're still asleep. And it's just the exact same things that we're seeing again and again. And the quotes are even kind of the same. We got to be giving more effort consistently. It starts on the defensive end. We got to lock in all this stuff, and yet on court, I mean, I thought in that Timberwolves game in that third quarter, they were kind of sleepwalking through it, just assuming that if they hung around, they would be able to close it out in the fourth. And it just wasn't the case. And I don't know.
I'd say sleepwalking through it is almost kind. They had 9 turnovers in that third quarter. They made 4 shots and had 9 turnovers.
Yes.
How?
Yeah. It's absurd. And I just don't know. Because it's across the board, right? Like it'd be one thing if it was just Paul George, who did not have a great performance. If it was just James Harden, who has played a lot, we've talked about that. I don't know what it is. And to your point about the resiliency too, I talk about this sometimes with players, how there's sort of like cumulative knocks, right? Like you take a bunch of little bumps and things all season that in the moment aren't really that big, but it adds up. It adds up by the time you get to the playoffs. You've just already been through so much that you don't have the legs that you once did, and has been being in these difficult so often also just led to sort of like because there's the positive, right, where you think that you can come back from it, but also just being in these situations all the time, like the way that they tense up in it, you would think it would be the opposite, right? Like when we think of good clutch teams, obviously it's not great if you've played a lot of games in the clutch, but teams that are good at it they tend to relax, they relish in the moment a little bit more, and I'm just not seeing that from this Clippers team when they start to let go of the reins a little bit.
And look, their clutch numbers overall this season are very good, but I was just running the numbers against teams of 500, above 500, I should say. And they're 20-16 since that 6-game losing streak, the first 5 games with James Harden, when they found their footing. They're 20-16 against teams above 500 on the season. But over their last 10 games now against teams above 500, they're 2-8. So how many games are they winning against the best in the league? They're 3-7 against the top 3 teams, the teams right in front of them. They are what, 1-2 against the Pelicans right now with one more game to go. Mm-hmm. You mentioned having those wake-up calls. I thought if there were going to be games that we're going to get up for and rise and meet the challenge against this squad because of playoff implications, because you just don't want to be pushed around anymore as they have been in the past. That first game coming out of the Grammy trip against the Minnesota Timberwolves at home, where they lost by 21, would be one of them. And then the first game coming out of the All-Star break against OKC on the road,
Oh my
granted,
God.
would be one of them too. And they were DOA. They were missing for large stretches of both of those ball games. So if they're not, if that's not enough to wake you up,
you brought up a couple of key losses, and that's been the thing too, right? Is it's one thing to have a regular season loss. A lot of these have been, it is still the regular season, but there's implications that kind of go beyond just a one of 82, whether it's a tiebreaker, whether it's a chance to move up into the standings. But what in your mind so far has been the worst loss of this Clippers season? Is it this Timberwolves loss? Is it the Lakers loss? Is it something else? How are you feeling? Like, what was the most egregious to you that should have been the wake-up call?
I mean, there's different ways to look at it, because now we've had a pattern of them blowing leads since the Lakers loss. So if that's become a trend because of that one game where they blew a 21-point lead, if that's the origin of these new bad habits, or them starting to feel the pressure of, oh no, here we go again, then that might be the worst loss of the season. I thought it was at the time. I thought it was worse than losing to Reggie Jackson and DeAndre Jordan and the Denver Nuggets team that was completely depleted and somehow beat the Clippers at home. But they righted the ship after that. That did get their attention. That was the next game, was the first game where Kawhi went into God tier mode, where he was playing basketball at such a high level that, yes, he should have been in the MVP conversation, and at a much, I guess a little bit more of that chatter should have been surrounding Kawhi Leonard. But the loss last night, considering how big of a game that was now, and even without Kawhi, and you can say, well, that's your out, it's not the worst loss because they only had him for one quarter. But just seeing the temperament of the team and them give in again for the third time in a week and a half and give up a big lead like that is very disappointing. It's very frustrating. And I've seen this joke now multiple times. I swear Adam's hair gets up for games when the PG does lately. Will it be the winner?
I love it.
Of the new Clippers logo sticker? I don't know. But I think last night, I don't think it's just recency bias, because I think last night's loss confirms some of those fears that we've had, that, oh no, they're not pulling out of this tailspin where they're 7-8 post Grammy road trip. It's continuing right now. And then when you add in the injury concerns with Kawhi and James Harden as well, he's questionable for tomorrow's game against Chicago with the left shoulder injury. It's like, yeah, this is a gut check time. This is a crossroads for this Clippers team with 18 games left before the playoffs. So every loss is important. Every game is important. Every win is important. But they are more magnified at the end of the season, because you would assume what we're seeing from the Clippers now is more of what we'll see in a playoff series, because we're closer to the playoffs than what we saw 2 months ago from the Clippers,
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think that there's something to the momentum thing, right? I mean, it's one thing if your team has sort of earned the right to coast a little bit at the end of the season, like, as I think of like the Denver Nuggets last year, where they had the 1 seed locked up. Jokic didn't end up winning the MVP because they kind of took it a little bit easier in the latter third of that season. They earned the right. We have nothing of the sort. And to see the team crumbling at this time of the year certainly feels a lot more concerning than the encouragement that I felt like earlier in the season, that I felt during the Grammys road trip, or the nine game win streak. Like, it's really, really discouraging at this time of the year, especially after the rest and stuff, which I can expect a couple of rusty games. But the schedule is not a cakewalk, and they have multiple games coming up in a very short time to figure things out. Now, sometimes this can, sometimes this can put the team together. When they do have these sort of focused stretches, it forces them to be a better version of themselves. But I mean, if they're in a nosedive, and if they're unable to turn this thing around, I mean, falling to 5 is really like I can't understate how big the difference is between 4 and 5, given like what the Western Conference looks like right now. And I mean, I talked about it last night with you, but the inevitability, what it feels like, Denver is one of the easiest schedules remaining, that they lock up the 1 seed. I just don't know what you expect. Like if you get out of a first round series from the 5 seed, and then you have to play in Denver. Like I just don't. Do you think you can flip the switch then? Because I haven't seen it. I just haven't seen it for a long enough time to believe that is in any way possible.
No, they haven't earned that level of confidence that they can flip that switch and beat the defending champs on the road in a 7-game series right now. Everyone should be rooting for the OKC Thunder to continue to win and Denver to lose. And they're taking on the Miami Heat right now in Miami. Like, it is time to do some standings watch, because as you mentioned, you end up in the 5 seed unless one of those bottom dwelling teams, and it could happen, upsets one of the top teams, one of the top 4 seeds. You're going to be on the road the entire time. You're not going to have home court the entirety of the way through the playoffs. Who would have imagined that just a month ago, when we were talking about, oh, this could be the first Clippers team to grab the number 1 overall seed? I see Veronica say there's no accountability, players and coach, no heart or pride. I'll say this.
That's what I mean when it's rotten. That's what I mean when I say there's something rotten at the core of this team. Oh, look, we got a very special guy coming
in. Hey, what's up, fellas? Just popping in before I head to a little birthday dinner. Just wanted to say, after the loss last night, I woke up, showered, went to work, had an okay day at work, took a couple walks around the block type thing to clear my head. And it changed absolutely nothing. It changed absolutely nothing.
I didn't give you a brain hatch? Nothing?
This shit, it's rotten to the core. That's just how it feels. Like, Adam, I loved what you were saying. Like, that Lakers loss might be the worst loss because that's what gets us into this scenario now, right? Where we're like seeing leads go away. But I don't know, man. They got to figure this shit out soon. Like, in 6 hours or something like that, because Kawhi's with the team, which is great. I don't think he's going to play both games of the back-to-back. I guess I don't want him to at this point, but it's tough, man. This might be the lowest I've been all year, which I think makes sense. I think most people are right now. Doesn't mean it can't go back up, but it's
difficult too, right? Because in some ways this feels even worse than the 6-game losing streak, just because that was like, it's so bad right now. We know, like, this can't maintain. It can't be this bad forever. This team continuing to play like a 500 team, I mean, that feels a little bit more within the realm of possibility, right? In a very scary, very sad way.
Yeah. And the schedule coming up, it's not easy. We got those 2 games against Portland and then 1 against Charlotte. And other than that, I'm like, I don't know. It feels like a coin flip for the most part. Friday, I'm terrified for.
I am a little bit encouraged from what Coach Lou said post-game last night. He almost swore about 5 different times. But specifically regarding the thing that bothered him the most was the lack of mental toughness out there. And them getting punked like that when you have a 22-point lead against a team that has called you old and then made you look old, with Anthony Davis in that possession defensively against Paul George, who early on in the ball game, when Kawhi was out there in the first quarter, I mean, they were picking on Naz Reid when he came in. He had that baseline dunk on Naz Reid. He looked good. He looked like he had pop. He had juice. They were ready. Everybody. I mean, it was a well-oiled machine the first 15 minutes, first 16, 18 minutes of the ball game to build up that lead. Again, Kawhi was out the entire second quarter. They only led by 13 heading out of the first. So they created that 22-point lead without Kawhi, a lot of it in that second quarter. And then they just gave it away. And the third time happening like this in over a week and a half, how can you not have some alarm bells? Like, you're building bad habits at the worst time of the season right now. And I think it just goes back further. To me, again, I wonder if it's a double-edged sword with all those resilient comeback victories that have created this false narrative. And that strength actually has some downside to it. It can be a weakness if you just expect it to happen like that continually, when it's not going to, because you have to play with effort for 48 minutes against the best teams in the league, or else you will get run. The talent disparity isn't wide enough for the Clippers to not be locked in for 48 minutes against Minnesota, even without Karl Anthony Towns. It's just not.
Especially if you look at the last after the starters. ESPN today was talking about how the Clippers have such a deep team that they'll be okay. We don't really. Like, we don't have, we don't have 9 guys vying for 8 playoff spots or something like that. We have 7 guys who can play in the playoffs. And then after that, we don't know when Russ is going to be back. We have no idea what Mason Tice's minutes look like in the offs, right? Like, this isn't a deep team. It is if you think about really good players, and that's where you stop. Again, starting 5, good to go. But,
here's the thing. They looked deep to me Sunday against Milwaukee when they didn't have Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, because everybody stayed focused because they knew they had to. The only shot they had, being at a talent disadvantage like that, was playing above their heads to some degree. Some of those guys, I mean, Terrence Mann and Amir Coffey both had 16 points on very good efficiency. They rose to the occasion. The cardiac Clips, the stay ready Clippers, they looked the part against Milwaukee and almost pulled that game out somehow when they had much less talent out there. Why can't we get that when they're fully loaded? And we saw it in the first quarter. That first quarter was so encouraging against Minnesota because, they're not losing the first quarter by 5 points and sleepwalking and just being lackadaisical in the way they enter this ball game and their approach. They hit the ground running. They played like it was a damn near playoff game. And then Kawhi's out, and then the 5-13 mark or whatever, they're up by 22 in the second quarter, and by the time they reach the end of the half, they're only up by 8. It's just baffling that they can let go of leads like this the way they do.
Do we need to trick them into thinking none of the stars will play? And then we say, surprise, at tip-off, the starting 5 is the actual starting 5. And then that way everyone's locked in, has that sense of urgency right from the jump, right? Fake injury reports.
Urgency is the word. Like, I don't understand. It's urgency. It's a level of, what does Brian Seaman always say? Competitive integrity.
I like that.
It's just holding up for 48 minutes with the same mindset the entire time. And that is what drives you and carries you. I mean, guys, we talked about it when Kawhi Leonard was going after this team after a win against Detroit. What did he say? We're getting by on talent too much right now and not execution. And now the chickens are coming home to roost because they're going to be missing some of that talent, and some of that talent is tired and worn out, and they don't have execution or great built-in habits to fall back on to get by against better competition, while guys could be missing or just are gassed.
Yeah, I mean, and the talent thing is also a double.
Like, that's how I feel.
The talent thing is also a double-edged sword, right? Because I mean, if that's what you're relying on to pull you through, you're gonna have at least one PG, or I mean, James Harden or even Kawhi game where they come up short. And like, what is the plan around that? We certainly don't have the skill level at depth, like the depth of skill that we've seen at this Clippers team before. So what's the plan then? I mean, and I will say too, because we should timestamp this as Charles generally does. as March
That'll
13th.
save you a lot of headaches.
Because on the flip end, not saying that they should do this, but like, I mean, we are a playoff mode Kawhi away from being dragged deeper than this team has any right to be with how they look right now.
Sure. As of this moment, I would 100% agree with that.
That's fair because they didn't look good heading into the playoffs last year. They didn't have a ton of momentum. They didn't have Paul George. And then in that first game, everybody, that Phoenix Suns team had their attention. You could see it out there.
Yeah.
They looked different than they had throughout the regular season where we said, what's their identity? They're consistently inconsistent. They're up and down. You never know what you're going to get. And then it was as simple as, oh, they're giving effort now every possession. But I just feel like, okay, you can do that. But if you're the 5 seed, that still may not be enough to get out of not just the first round, but the second round, because you just put yourself in a terrible position where even if you're playing the right way, then it's too little too late because that path of least resistance is not there. They're actually having to go through a gauntlet now. Like you can win or lose a championship, I believe, based on seeding and having an easier road and having an easier path and having the right matchups. Like it's not just you were the best team. There was a little bit of luck, good fortune along the way, and maybe you made some of it by making sure you had home court advantage, at least in the first round.
Yeah,
this made me laugh so hard, Case.
This is a strong contender, I think, for the comment of the stream so far. I hope Adam is keeping a running tally on it. What was I gonna say? Yeah, I forgot. Sorry, I got thrown off by this comment.
By this great comment by Case.
Contention.
I do have to head out. I hope you guys have a great rest of this live. I hope it gets a little more relaxing. I don't think it should because the Clippers need to work on a lot of shit. But hey, well, I hope we can do a double dip. Actually, I hope I don't get to do a double dip because that means they lost tomorrow. That's in the contract.
That's true. No, I want to be on for the big. I want to be on for the big win over the Pels.
Me too, buddy. I want you to be on for that win too. All right, bye, fellas.
Good stuff, Chuck. Rock was saying, "I think we can beat Phoenix." That's great. I think they can too. If it takes 7 games and then you're taking on Denver afterwards, who dismantled a team in the first round in 5 games, does that put you in a great spot?
Well,
or does that set you up to fail?
So I will say if you get Phoenix in the 3-6 matchup, in the unlikely scenario that the Clippers are able to vault over the Timberwolves and assuming the Nuggets get to 1, that's a pretty sweet path. But that a lot of things like here's my issue with that stuff in the standings is, we've seen the Clippers try to get cute before. I still firmly believe that in their seeding to kind of cherry pick their matchup. I think that is something that can backfire on you. And it just assumes a lot of things that are out of your control, right? Like I don't like to, as much as it's fun to like, as when we're talking in broadcasting, like imagine different matchups or how things could plan out. If that's your team strategy, I think it's really poor to depend on a lot of things that are outside of your control. So I don't think that that's really the thought. But if they got Phoenix, that being said, if they got Phoenix in the 3-6 and Denver is 1, I feel like that's a pretty good route for them.
Show me how they're getting the 3 seed right now, because they're technically 3 games back of Minnesota, but it's not 3, it's 4, because if they tie, the tiebreaker goes to Minnesota. They have to jump ahead of them by a game.
Very true.
That's why last night was so meaningful in all the wrong ways for the Clippers. You needed that game. Not only do you close the gap, you get the tiebreaker, or at least likely would have had it. And now it's the same thing with the Pelicans, right? I think we're looking at the same scenario coming on Friday because, correct me if I'm wrong, they have played 3 times so far. The Pelicans won the first meeting, 116-106 in LA. Then the Clippers demolished them on the road. That was one of the best wins. That was the most current best win of the season at that time. They won 111-95, and it wasn't even that close. And they looked dominant. That's one of the best wins of the season. But then you're coming out, and I'm trying to see. Wait, was that the last time they played?
No, the last time they played was
they just
February.
played. Yeah, they just played
when they lost by 11.
And that was 117 to 106 on February 7th.
Mm-hmm.
So it is the same thing. If you win this game, the head-to-head tiebreaker then gets booted down to which team is actually winning their division. Just like it would have been if they won that game last night against Minnesota. And the Pelicans, here's a problem. They're currently 2.5 games up in the Southwest on the Dallas Mavericks. So the Clippers don't have the big advantage like they had against Minnesota, who's third in their division. The Pelicans are at the top of theirs in the Southwest.
Well, I mean, trash division.
Don't matter. If they win it.
In terms of divisions, though.
Their conference record versus the Clippers, which is what it would go to then, they're at 24-18. The Clippers are at 25-17. So they're right there. They're right next to each other. They're neck and neck.
Oh my God, money made me numb. Sorry to interrupt, but just kind of brought up something haunting. They said Kawhi saw the vision early. Remember, like 2 weeks ago, he said we're just trying to be a top 6 team.
It's not exactly what he said.
It's not exactly what he said, but he did say it.
No, he said for sure be a top 6 seed, just meaning we're not a play-in team. It wasn't like 6 is just as good as 3, which is how a lot of people have interpreted it. That's not what he said at all. And that's not what he was asked. I think there's a difference there. There's a nuance to it. Kawhi does eliminate top players. Kawhi at his best in a playoff series.
That's the one ray of hope,
he's
right? Like
that's
the shining light right now. Yeah, like if
he's like a top 10 player in a playoff series of all time. Now we're not talking about top 75 player of all time. When it comes to the playoff series, the 7-game series, there may be 9 guys I would take over Kawhi Leonard in the history of the league in a 7-game series. Maybe.
Well, it depends on era too, I guess. Because like I mean, Kawhi is so like versatile. So I think it, but yeah, top 10.
Yeah,
top
we done
10
with the
playoff
90s.
player,
You're right. We done with the 90s. We don't love the 90s.
Someone's asking any word on Kawhi, which just to update everybody, he did leave the game against the Timberwolves. Back spasms. He's expected to travel with the team. Still no official word. Yeah, he's with the team. Still listed as questionable for the game against the Bulls. We'll see how that goes with it being a back-to-back.
My memory served me well finally, because when he left the ball game, the first thing I thought of was I was watching him once pregame, and this was in 2021 in March, so 3 years ago. And he grabbed at his lower back at the free throw line and walked to the locker room, and it came out that, he was a late scratch. It was back spasms. He played the next game. Doesn't mean it's going to happen this time. Doesn't mean it's a perfect analog to what's happening, but he is at least traveling with the team.
Adam, I feel like I was talking about this with Chuck yesterday, but I mean, I can't imagine what it's like for an athlete, but just as a person, as you get up into your 30s and 40s, back pain becomes just a very real part of your life.
Well, I mean, Ivica Zubac's had back spasms earlier in the season, remember? And he's 26. Yep. But the point is, he overcame it very quickly, looked fine, and had one of the most crazy playoff runs we have seen percentage-wise in that 2021 run before tearing the ACL. So I'm hoping he's at least available for the Pelicans game on Friday. If this Clippers team was playing the right way and building the right habits and being more consistent out there, you'd say, without Kawhi Leonard, even against Chicago, they'll be fine. They don't need him for that one. Save him for Friday. But you can't take any team lightly with the way the Clippers have looked recently. That game against the Bulls.
I agree. I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I still think that we're at this point in the season where, like, yes, stacking wins is important. Yes, optimizing seeding to the best of our ability is. I also think that there's something to be said about building championship habits, and I think that that happens against better competition. So if Kawhi only goes in one of these games, I would still prefer it to be in the against the
course.
Pelicans, and that's not to take Chicago lightly because they could still beat us. It's just, even if you lose that game against the Pelicans, second night of a back-to-back, totally understandable. I'd like to lose it building upon the foundation that, that we should be at, like getting to the end point where we need to be by the time this season ends and playoffs roll around, which is in a month. So, like, regardless, if he only plays one game, I would really prefer it to be the game that isn't a guaranteed win. If anything, it's maybe closer to a guaranteed loss with it being on the second night of a back-to-back. But for the sake of getting this team to a destination, I think that that's the one that he needs to play in. We talked about this last night. Like this, if you want a chance to bounce back, if you want a chance to snap out of this funk and show everybody, show the league something, show yourself something, show me something, show it in this New Orleans Pelicans game. Show it to me on Friday.
The Pelicans are 2 games behind the Clippers right now. It's very close to a must-win to hold on to the 4 seed, winning that game against the Pelicans. I'm with you. Honestly, the punishment for the way Paul George and James Harden played after Kawhi left should be, you guys got to figure this Chicago game out without Kawhi.
Yeah.
Make it happen. Because maybe Paul George can catch a rhythm. Maybe coming into a game, and if he knows off the bat that, okay, we're not going to have Kawhi, this is how I need to play. I have to be in attack mode the entire way through. Those 2 combining for 21 shots just is not going to get it done against Minnesota. It won't get it done against Chicago either. Like, Paul George has to put up 17 plus. James Harden near 15. I want to see both those guys deliver because they're freaking Hall of Famers. And Paul George has to be, for them to reach the ultimate goal, the second best player, at least the second best scorer on this Clippers team. And that means you have to be a number 1 option at times, like against Chicago.
I agree. So let's close out on this because we got to wrap this up. But Rock brought up a great comment. 1 versus 1 isn't the issue. And I think that's kind of where we both land on Kawhi Leonard. That's the one silver lining, right? Do we trust R2 and R3 to be better than the other team? And I think for me, in a vacuum, the answer is yes. In terms of what we've seen lately, highly questionable. Where are you at with this, Adam? Because I think that is the issue with the depth, right? I think in past years, we haven't seen as much, still a lot, but we haven't seen as much of the high tier, high name, high recognition talent, but we've seen more, skilled players across positions. Sometimes it's overlapping, so there's sort of, it's not always optimized. But the drawback with that is, this team is only deep when those 3 are playing like they need to play.
Well, let's just take the Pelicans, for example. If they took them on in a playoff series, who's their number 1? Brandon Ingram or Zion? Number 3 is CJ McCollum. They match up pretty well against them. They do. Even playing the way they are right now, I wouldn't feel terrible about that. Be careful what you wish for. They're going to have to scheme against Zion, build a wall against him like they weren't able to, for the most part, against Giannis. They had their moments. I trust Zoo with some of that. But against Phoenix, you look at, their number 2 is Devin Booker, who plays like a number 1 all the time. Paul George has to be like that if they're going to match up well against them, because Kawhi can cancel out KD and I think get the best of him. Paul George, his biggest nemesis is Devin Booker. He has gotten up for those games in the past. He played well against Phoenix in that playoff series without Kawhi. He has to match Devin Booker. That's not easy. So, no, I don't feel great about it right now. And then you're talking about James Harden, Bradley Beal, who has more production there. They don't have a true point guard. But, yeah, these guys have to play to their capabilities. Otherwise, they're just stars in name only. And the talent. And look, Paul George, I'm sure he's not 100% right now. I think that's pretty obvious. The groin, then the knee injury. But he's got to dig deep. He just has to. Because what I worry about with him is mentally, if he's feeling like I can't do some of the things I used to do, I worry about what that could do to Paul George mentally. Now, he tried to dunk on Gobert last night and almost had it. Probably should have. It's not easy, but I thought that one was going in. He tried to dunk on Chet recently. He's had some explosive plays here and there where he looks like himself. It's just that third quarter and that possession against Ant was hard to watch. That was in real time Ant making his case that the Clippers are old and slow. Are they old and slow, or are they just a little bit gassed right now? And Paul George can be at the same level he was, where through a 2-month stretch, playing off of James Harden and Kawhi Leonard, when the Clippers were rolling, he was perfect. He was exactly what they needed out of him. He was, as Justin Wilson would say, a rich man's Michael Porter Jr. The way he was playing and fitting in and catching and shooting and making quick decisions and just being an uber efficient scorer out there for the Clippers. That's what they need. Maybe not against Chicago. He's got to be the number one option, but that's what's being asked of him. That was always the deal when you brought him in. So be that guy. We'll see what happens against Chicago with this team because they can't overlook them before getting to the Pelicans. But if Kawhi's not there, there's still no excuses. If James Harden's not there, they can still win that game with Paul George and guys stepping up around him. They can. They need to.
Agreed. I think we're going to have to get out of here. Who are you feeling comment-wise?
I don't know if I've been paying attention close enough. Who do you think's in the running here? Rock has been pretty good.
Yeah, let's give it to Rock.
He's been consistently good. What we're looking for is consistency from the Clippers and in the comment section as from the commenters. Okay, Rock, you want it. You got to hit us up in the comment section on Twitter. Just confirm it's you. I'll send you the sticker. I hope you dig it. This is the new logo, baby, right here.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning into the stream. Hopefully, we're coming back at you at some point with some more positive stuff to go off of. But this is just kind of where we're at right now. You can listen to this podcast where you get your podcast. Subscribe to us over on YouTube.com. That's at Clippers Podcast. And Adam, you want to send them off with one little positive thing?
They win the next 3 games. A lot of what's happened over the last 2 weeks will be forgotten.
That's
a lot to ask, but Kawhi Leonard traveled with the team, and we all speculated, it's a bad back. Can he get on a plane right now? And he is with them. So that is great news right there. They got their shot because they have Kawhi Leonard with them, and I'm assuming he's going to play at some point on this road trip, hopefully. But yes, this marks another edition of C&D Live. We appreciate all you guys. We love you. Get to us at Clippers Podcast on the YouTube, at Clippers Pod on Twitter. And as Will Updike and Chuck, you guys always say it. You gonna close us out the right way? Do it.
As our co-host Charles Mockler always says, let's go Clips.